welcome to PCB Chat, where we talk with experts across the printed circuit design, manufacturing, and electronics supply chain fields. I'm Mike Buetow, Editor-in-Chief of PCD&F and Circuits Assembly. Today's podcast is sponsored by PCB West, the leading conference and exhibition for the printed circuit design and manufacturing industry. Join thousands of engineers and designers this September at the Santa Clara, California Convention Center. Visit the website at pcbwest.com for information. On July 8th, the ESD Alliance released the first quarter revenue results for the electronic design automation industry. My guest today is Wally Rhines, CEO Emeritus of Mentor, who's here to discuss the latest numbers. Wally, the data published show a sequential rebound from the fourth quarter and a big jump year over year, as the overall industry revenue was up more than 16% in the March 2019 period. So who do we thank?
Well, we thank the printed circuit board and business in general, and the U.S. in particular. That's where it was strongest. Overall, worldwide, we saw 15.9% growth year to year, and the U.S. was the fastest growing out of those at 30.7% growth year to year, so very, very strong.
And just for clarity's sake, do the revenue numbers represent where tools or services were purchased or where they're actually put into use?
No, this is actually the purchase. The numbers come from the EDA suppliers, and when they recognize revenue, they report that in these numbers. So it's at the time of shipment of the software to the customer.
Now, it looks like some of the other related numbers were good too, with semiconductor and the other segments doing pretty well.
They were indeed, in fact, virtually across the board. If you look at the classic EDA license and maintenance revenue, that grew worldwide 18.8%. That's an all-time record. And then when you throw in the IP and services, the year-to-year growth at 16.3%, not quite an all-time record, but very, very near.
Wally, do you know which quarter is typically the strongest for EDA?
I don't have statistical data, but typically first quarter is not a strong quarter. Typically, things start out slow in the year, and as you get to the end of the calendar year, you tend to have a concentration of bookings. On the other hand, the majority of companies recognize their revenue ratably, which smooths that out and says there shouldn't be big fluctuations quarter to quarter, except when there are sales of hardware such as emulators, which cause a one-time blip. But for ratable recognition, it tends to be smooth.
Now, it looks like the headcount rise was nearly 6% over this time last year, which seems to me to be a staggering number. Is any particular region appearing to benefit the most?
Well, it is a large number, but it's not that unusual. I think actually the unusual part is that this time the headcount grew at substantially less than the revenue growth. Usually the headcount grows at more than the revenue growth, and one has to wonder how long can that go on. The regional, I'd have to look at and see. Let's see. Japan headcount grew 4%. Europe headcounts grew almost 10%. The U.S. headcount grew just under 3%. I'm sorry, that's North America. And then, as you said, on a worldwide basis, the headcount 5.8%.
So if headcount usually precedes revenue growth, and I don't want to put words in your mouth there, but if headcount typically would be greater than revenue growth, does this suggest that the industry is being cautious about its revenue numbers going forward?
Well, when headcount growth is less than revenue growth, that reflects some caution. Historically, over the last 5 to 10 years, headcount growth has exceeded revenue growth, which means people are speculating on a stronger future, hiring people in advance of revenue. This is a case where the revenue has jumped in a single quarter much faster than headcount. Headcount can't fluctuate greatly because there's a long lead time in hiring the kind of employees the EDA industry has to hire, and so it tends to be a smoother quarter-to-quarter function. The companies in general will hire the people when they are available and not concentrate those hires in any specific quarter.
Okay. Finally, we see that semi shipments are slowing, and the Semi Trade Group went negative on the equipment spend forecast for the rest of the year. Does that historically precede a design tools slowdown as well?
It has. Historically, the semiconductor industry goes into a downturn before the EDA industry, and the EDA industry then trails on the upturn as well. Now, as EDA has become more ratable, that effect has been muted. And the other thing is that we're in the midst of a phenomenon where EDA is gaining a lot of new customers from the system side of the business, IT companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook, as well as automotive companies and a variety of other system companies, and is also in a wave of accelerated funding of new startups doing domain-specific processors. So those kinds of structural changes may, in fact, override whatever is happening to semiconductor revenue. I'd also note that the decline in semiconductor revenue is heavily driven by a drop in price of memory. If you look at Logic, which is by far the larger consumer of EDA software, it's very modestly down year to year, and so it should be more closely tied to EDA revenue than memory.
Thanks. Last thing, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to comment on this or not, but has there been any impact that you can count with regard to the trade issues between the U.S. and China?
When I look at the data in this report, there is no particular evidence of that. The China growth year to year for EDA purchases was strong at 24.4%, but in fact India was stronger and Korea was the strongest at a phenomenal 125%. So I'd have to say China continued to be a strong contributor, but this is data for the first quarter of this year, and any disruption might be after the first quarter.
Great. Anything else you want to add before we close, Wally?
Just a tremendously encouraging quarter for the EDA industry, and for all of us, we're excited about the acceleration in design activity in general and the entry of a whole variety of new types of companies designing their own chips, systems, and printed circuit boards.
Well, it's always good to be the bearer of good news, right?
It is. It's a pleasure.
My guest today has been Wally Rhines, CEO Emeritus of Mentor. And Wally, I want to thank you for coming on PCB Chat and sharing the numbers with us today.
Thanks very much, Mike.
And I want to thank our sponsor, PCB West, the leading conference and exhibition for the printed circuit design and manufacturing industry. Visit the website at pcbwest.com for more information. For PCB Chat, I'm Mike Buetow. Have a nice day.